The new responses endpoint by OpenAI makes it even quicker to build a ChatGPT clone in Bubble, all with no code, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that in this video. Just a quick explanation. The responses endpoint is clearly the direction that OpenAI are going in, and it brings together features previously exclusive to the assistant and to the chat completion endpoints. Basically, any OpenAI videos that I recorded before March 2025 will be using chat completion, and they're not planning to depreciate it, get rid of it. It seems they are planning to get rid of the assistance endpoint, so do watch out for that. But we'll be using responses, and we'll be using it to store part of the conversation, the history of the conversation in OpenAI, not even retrieve it, but reference it, and then that means we don't even need to store the conversation history in our Bubble app. So let's launch into it. I'm going to go into my Bubble app here, and I'm just going to create a new page and call it ChatGPT clone with, I just call responses. Okay, now this is not a lesson in UI design. I'm going to be using fixed layout. Obviously, you'd use rows and columns if you want to make it look really good and responsive, but I want to do this super quick and scrappy just to show you how we can use that new endpoint. So we're going to have where our user can enter a new message, and then we'll have this as the send, and then we'll have a repeating group to show the history of the conversation. So you could still store the messages in your Bubble app if you wanted to be able to recall them. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways in this video, so do stick around. First of all, I'm just going to have it as a list of text because I want to be able to display the full conversation history. If you didn't need to show the full conversation history, I'll summarize that at the end of the video. But we are, in both cases, going for this historical contextual awareness of what has been said in the conversation before. So I'm going to use a custom state because I want a list of the messages. So I'll say list of messages, and this is going to be of text, and it's going to be a list. This just means it's not being stored in the database. If the page is refreshed, you lose, but it's not been losing the messages on OpenAI. If you were to save the the previous message ID, you could still retrieve it, but from the user's perspective in your Bubble app, it's being lost. And there are some legitimate cases for it, hence why I'm demonstrating. I'm then going to put some text in there, and I'm just going to say current sales text. Okay. Right, let's go into the API connector. So this is the real powerhouse of Bubble. It lets you connect to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of external apps. You can see here, these are all ones that I've covered in previous videos. And if you're interested in learning more about those, web scraping, other AIs, basically anything you can imagine, it's well worth becoming a member because you get access to over 500 Bubble tutorial videos and course content that we've created over the last few years, and you can explore all of that with our own AI assistant, so you can see exactly the sort of things that you can build with AI and with no code. But right now I'm going to go ahead and add in a new one here, and I'm just going to call it OpenAI 2025, and I'm doing that because I think I might have other OpenAI connections up above, but that's simply because this is my demo app. We then say private key and header, and where am I getting this from? Well, we are taking this and plugging it into our Bubble app. So we have authorization bearer API key, and we have our endpoint here. So I'm going to copy the endpoint, and I'm simply going to call this send message. It's a post request. How do I know that? Well, because it will say somewhere, it says post request there. Paste in the endpoint. Then I'm going to write in bearer and paste in my API key, and I will of course be deleting that before publishing this video. Changing this to action because I want like a click of the button of my user in order to use this, rather than say like on page load. That's more what data's for. And then to just get it started, we're going to keep things so simple. I'm going to copy this and paste it in there, and let's test it out. So by initializing the call, we are saying, first of all, are there any errors? We'll see in a moment. And also we're training Bubble on the structure of the data that's responded. So I'm going to say initialize call. I would have got an error if there was an issue at this point. although it is taking a few seconds. Now, I have actually seen that at the point of recording this, ChatGPT is encountering errors, but not the OpenAI API. So yes, here we go. We get back an output from the assistant, and here is the output. Right, now let's take this and start storing messages and start feeding, or at least referencing earlier messages in order to get that conversation, that historical conversation going. So I'm going to scroll down, and first of all I'm going to say store. And so store is going to equal true because it is a Boolean value. So let's go back in here. Now with JSON you have a comma between everything. So we'll say, but then because it's a Boolean, it's not in speech marks. So I'm going to say that, and I'm going to rerun it, and this will actually change what the response is, because we're going to get back a new parameter, and that is the response ID up here. And this is what we feed in to future messages so that OpenAI knows what the previous messages are. So I'm going to copy that, click save, and then let's update this to check how well it's working. So this time I'm going to say my name is Matt, and I'm going to initialize the call. And so I now should just get back a fairly standard greeting, how's your day? I'm going to click save because I'm going to add in another parameter, which is previous response ID. And notice that this is a string, so it needs to go in between speech marks. So we'll add it in here. And in order to test it, I'm going to paste in that response ID from before. If you didn't copy it to your clipboard, you can always go back in here. There it is. I'm going to click save. Save. Cool. Because now I'm going to ask it, what is my name? Because if it is remembering the previous part of the conversation, it will know that my name is Matt. Now, this worked when I was testing it. Let's hope it works here. We get back, oh, I can't tell your name based on previous response ID. Okay, I did just do a little bit of debugging, hitting pause on the recording to work out what was going on. And it turns out that you have to pass in the previous response ID in order for it to know that you're having a conversation where you want to retrieve it. It's almost like consider previous response ID and input needs to be run as a pair. So this is how you would do it. Basically, your first message, if we look at the documentation, it's string or it's null. So we have to send a null value if there is no previous message. So let's put something in here such as the company I work for is Planet No Code. Okay, I'm now going to initialize the call. And we just get back a fairly standard response. Let's copy the ID, and then if I replace this in here, this is what I was trying to get work before, but it turns out you need to have previous response ID in there, whether that is a value or it's null, depending on whether it's the start of your conversation. I'll say, who do I work for? Now hopefully this one's going to work. There we go, it's worked. Let me scroll down so it's easier to see. You mentioned that you work for Planet No Code. Okay, so that is now working for us. Let's link it in with the UI on the page so that you can see how quick it's possible to make a no-code chatbot. So let's do that. So first thing I'm going to do here is make some of this dynamic. We see different instructions for different parts of the API connector. So if we wanted to make part of this dynamic, we use square brackets, but down here we use triangle brackets. There's also a process known as JSON safe, or making text JSON safe. For example, if I was to put speech marks in here, like a user could submit a question and include speech marks, I'm now going to cause a JSON syntax error, because how does it know what speech marks are part of the code and speech marks that are part of the message? And so Bubble has got a text modifier called JSON safe. I'm going to show you that in a minute, and that effectively escapes punctuation or anything that pesky punctuation that would cause an issue. But it also wraps the whole thing in speech marks. So I'm going to remove the speech marks and just write in message. Now if I wanted to reinitialize this, I'd have to put my speech marks back in here otherwise I'd get a JSON syntax error. It also is not private. Private refers to, is this data that I need to keep from my user? An example of data that I need to keep from my user is by marking my authentication as private key in header. I don't want them to have my private key. It's like my password. They could build my OpenAI account with that. But the message that my user submits, that's not private. It's actually their data. They've written it, so that's fine. I'm then also going to make this here dynamic too, so that if it is a follow-up message, I can pass in the previous message ID. So I'm going to call response ID like that. Okay, remember this will break it. In fact, I'll write in null as a default value. Cool. So now let's go over to our page, and when send is clicked, first of all, we're going to add this to our custom state. So the custom state is on the page, list of messages. And we can't just add to a list. We actually have to reference the original list and then add to that. So we would go to our page, which I've called ChatGPT, clone responses, list of messages, plus item. Now we'll take the multi-line input that our user has written. Then we will send it to OpenAI. So OpenAI send message. And the message will be our multi-line inputs value, and I'm going to JSON value, and then here is where our JSON safe it. Cool. And then here we would say we now need to save our response. So I'm then going to say set state. In fact, I can just duplicate this. Copy, paste. That's with a right click. And what I'm pasting back in is the response that I get from here. So if I go back into manual, we want to be in outputs, content, text. Now, some of these are lists. Basically, square brackets can symbolize a list in JSON. So actually, that's because you can do really complex things, of course, with OpenAI, get multiple different responses, get structured responses back. But we basically want outputs, the first outputs content, the first part, the first content, and its text. Okay. So if we go back into the workflow, we're going to add in an item here. Now it's the results of step 2's, outputs, first item, content, first item, text. Okay. I think we should just give that a little test before we go any further. So we'll just say hello. My repeating group is not getting its data from anywhere. So my repeating group is going to get data from the custom state. List of messages. Here we go. Yeah, let's go back to our demo and refresh. I'll say hello. So there's our message, and there's the one back from the AI. Now what we aren't doing is successfully passing in the previous response ID. So I think we, in this case, need to set up another custom state. Remember, we're doing this because we want our chat to be temporary. You can, of course, and you can check out my previous videos, but they go into much more detail. The process will be very similar if you want to store all of the history in your Bubble app. It will be very similar to some of my most recent videos that use the chat completion endpoint. Because I can't actually find a particular statement of how long OpenAI stores the message data for. In their general data retention policy, it says 30 days. That's the closest I've got to an answer to basically how much you can rely on them storing the conversation history. But we'll just call this one previous ID, and it's text. So now we would set another state. In fact, we can add it in here, previous ID, and we can take it from here, the ID. Then we need to make a statement here which shows null if we don't have a previous ID, but if we do, actually puts that previous ID in, and that way we can actually have the flowing conversation. So one way that we can do that is to go to where we've got previous ID, and we can say is not empty, format as text. In fact, it's probably easier to say is empty, formatted as text. So if it is empty, we want to pass in a null value, but if it isn't empty, we want to pass in the actual value itself. So then that's ChatGPT clones responses, previous ID, and then I'm just going to JSON safe it. You probably could get away with just wrapping it in speech marks, because remember, it needs to be in speech marks. Null, not speech marks. But if you're actually passing in a string, like the previous ID, then you are going to be using speech marks. Cool. Right, I then think that that is actually worth giving a test. So I'm going to go back here, refresh it. Remember, we're not actually saving it on the page. It's all gone, at least from the perspective of our user. So I'll say, hello, my name is James. And then I'm going to say, remind me what is my name. Your name is James. Okay, so like I said midway through this video, what if you don't actually care about showing the conversation history, but you just want to, you just want this chat to kind of show a response and what the user's written and the last response. Let me modify what we've got so that it will do that. I'm going to delete this repeating group, and I'm just going to add in some text up here. And this is just going to, instead of our, here we go, custom states. Instead of our list of messages, I'm just going to say last assistant message as text. So we're not having to do any of this adding an item in because we're not dealing with a list. We're not even saving our end, our user message. We're just relying on OpenAI to store it. And so in here, we would say last assistant message, and we go straight to this bit, and we will just have to write that out again. So it's step 2's output, first items, content, first items, text. Okay. And then when we print the text, we are going for that custom state. So that is ChatGPT clone responses, last assistant message. Then for good measure, I'm going to reset the input too. And that way we can actually have a flowing conversation. Probably need to reset the input. Reset the input there. That should work. Right, let's refresh the page. So remember, we've lost the ID because that was in the custom state. We've refreshed the page. So this is a whole new conversation. So this time I'm going to say, hello, my name is Jane. Let's improve the UI even more. We can set focus on an input. There we go. Let's refresh that. So this just means that our user is going to feel like they're typing straight into it. If you want to look at how do you click a button with the enter key, a little bit like how Slack or Discord works, we've got videos covering that. So I'll say, hello, my name is Jake. Okay, and then I can type right back in there. I'll say, I am in the UK. Now, obviously, this is scrappy. If you want to add in nice loading animations, again, we've got videos covering that. Now I'm just going to say, what is my name and location? Okay, because that's going to check that it's remembered each of the previous parts of the conversation. Your name is Jake and you're in the UK. One final bit I'll point out is that if you are using this method, OpenAI have changed once more what the system prompt, or what they did name the dev prompt, it's now instructions, because you might want to change the instructions, your system, your dev prompt, as the conversation goes along. So you would do that by adding it as a parameter. It's no longer a message. So I'm going to add it in here, instructions, and I'm also going to make this dynamic so that I can JSON safe it. I just usually name, I didn't do it there, but I normally put JSON in the dynamic like the merge field to remind me to JSON safe it when I run it in the workflow. And I'm doing this so that I could, your instructions, your system prompt, it can be massive. It can be a page worth, which can be really annoying to write in the API connector here and constantly try and escape it. So it's not private. I'm going to go back into my workflow. And then I'm going to use arbitrary text, and I'm going to JSON safe the arbitrary text. That just means that I can type in here, I can put in paragraphs, so I can say, you always respond in Spanish, and then I can say, you always respond in Spanish. You are over the top happy in tone. Okay, but that's a rubbish system prompt, but you get the idea. So let's go back here. So this time I'll say, hello, my name is Daniel, and we should get a response. There we go. Now, I don't speak Spanish, but it's putting some emojis to show how happy it is. So hopefully that's a comprehensive look at how you use store and previous message response ID in Bubble, how you can use the null value. The reason that response endpoint is so powerful, and how even though chat completion isn't going anywhere, if I'm going to use OpenAI, I will be using responsive, is because of how easy it makes file search and web search. And we have got tutorials on both of those that we've released in just the last 2 weeks, so do go and check those out. But remember, by becoming a member, you get access to all of the content that we've basically ever created.